What's up, guys? Commander Jaime here, bringing you a Bluish Flame deck profile. So this is probably my first Gold Paladin deck profile on this channel. If you guys have seen my previous videos, I've mentioned that I also play Golds. And so how I picked up Golds was through Bluish Flames. And I picked them up around, basically Gurgurite came out in GPT-03. And ever since then, I've had an interest in Golds, but I ultimately picked Bluish Flames to get into the clan myself. And of course, you know, they're knights in gold, and of course blue flames, and like in the anime, explosion blue, and the whole Claire getting a guard restriction, and of course a crit. It was really cool and appealing to me, so that's how I got into golds myself, and it's a fun deck. And I've been trying to keep it up to date as support comes out, and definitely with all the Gurgurite Stride Zone and some of the cards that we've gotten that are generic have helped with some of the problems it kind of has, and also help with keeping up with the G era kind of stuff. So let's get into it. So the Forerunner, I ultimately changed it to Cheer Up Trumpeter. Trumpeter is basically a non-GB Forerunner that you could shove into Soul and then give your Vanguard the red tech skill, where if you call something from deck, your Vanguard gets +3. And that's for every superior call you make from deck. So it's ideal on turns for doing Prominence Glare. So if you're trying to go for the kill turn, that's very helpful in that sense. And it's pretty dumb when you have a Bruno behind Glare, because for every superior call, essentially your Vanguard column is actually getting +6 for every superior call, making it actually viable to kill your opponent with Glare, even though they have a G Guardian. So that's really nice. And outside of the Glare turns, she's useful, or he, I can't even tell if it's he or she. It's useful on stride turns like Glorious Raining, where you superior call like 3 or 4 or 5 units, and your Vanguard just gets like +3 for each of them. So your Glorious Raining, let's say you call 4, it gets a +12, so 12 plus 26 makes it 38k, and it's no longer an easy G-guardable attack. So in that sense, it takes more cards out of your opponent's hand. On top of that, you've called units to make new comms for more attacks in that sense. And sometimes it becomes applicable when you do Law Gurgurite, or Radiant Sword, or even the Holy Flame Stride. It just depends how much superior calling you can get, and see if the power gain for your Vanguard is beneficial in that. And the other starters like Guido and the little dog, they're Legion restricted, so even if you're like in Legion and you stride, your Legion heart doesn't count as in the Legion state for your Vanguard. So instead of being like a dead Forerunner, you're better off running Trumpeter. And if you're facing against Sling Joker too, you might as well scoop it up and not give him the opportunity to lock it, such as Chaos. For the grade 3s, I play 8, and they're all Bluish Flames. Glare is basically our ace, and what he does is that if this unit's on Legion and something was called from deck, you can counterblast one, discard a Bluish Flame, so any of these guys in your hand, and it gets plus crit and the red tech skill, where on attack, this battle attacked, your opponent can call grade 1s or higher. So what I like about the skill, it's not once per turn, so you can do this multiple times. And I've killed people when they've been at 2 damage or 3 damage, because you can get this off 2 or 3 times pretty easily. And then of course there's your drive tracks. So if you think you can finish them off right off the back, or even the later game when you just have a bunch of grade 3s for whatever reason and have enough counterblasts, you can just go nuts. And with helping with that is this other skill, and it's non-Legion restricted, so you can even do this when you ride grade 3 even though your opponent's at grade 2. Counterblast 1, kill one of your rear guards, and then check the top 4 to call Liberator. And that's helpful to get your chain calling going, and that it helps him ignite his other skill to be able to use the other skill that gives him the guard restriction and the crit. So that's super helpful. And the reason I like him is because this deck, I've made it focus that his actual skill to do the final explosion blue turn kind of thing is actually viable. So I'll go into more in depth with the other cards that go with it, but essentially you do want a Bruno and a Trumpeter going off in that turn and making glare big as shit. So your opponent can't guard it, and you just win. For Percival, because he's free for one. Being able to call something from the top of the deck, a Liberator, and potentially saving up your Counterblast for this guy later on, or even your strides, like a Radiant Sword, for example. And it's just a big plus in gold, so you don't have to worry about trying to countercharge as much as well. And he gets +2 when he attacks, so it's a 22k Vanguard attack if you Legion. And if you have a 7k booster, and he's not Legioned, and your opponent's like at grade 2, like at a 10k grade 2, or a grade 3 for whatever reason that's 10k, it's a 20k con, so that hits numbers still. And then he's just been handy. So sometimes you just need to turn to like gather your resources, and Percival is there to help you get started without any counterblasts. And the other option is Core, but Core eats up counterblasts, which kind of contradicts with Glare, and you kind of want to save those counterblasts for Glare or for like your Radiant Swords and Loud Gurgurits and Glorious Raining and so on. So that's tries essentially. Okay. So for the grade 2s, I do have non-generics in the grade 1s. So having Liberators for the grade 2s wholly helps, because some of these cards are reliant on having the Vanguard as a Liberator early on in the game, such as him, and he goes off if you have 2 Liberators in the Vanguard circle, so that's for later. But the important thing is that he also has a Liberator name. So we'll start out with Oath Liberator Echo Veil. With Oath Liberator, he's on call, Counterblast 1, check the top 3, call Liberator, and then bottom deck the rest. He's really great for the early game. He gives what Gold's lacking Gurgit right now, the early game pressure, without actually calling a lot of cards from hand. And being able to call something such as like just Josephus that gives you a draw, or getting a Bruno for later setups for the Glare turn, it helps a lot. And he's also in the late game a 1-card Unite if you really need to do it in your main phase. So an example is that if you stride Loud Gurgit or Glorious Raining, you can call this from your hand, do the skill, and you're in Unite. So, and that's important because your grade 3s don't have on-stride skills, they're Legions. So it's harder to get Unite unless you like call something from hand to actually proc it, so that way your Vanguard can do something. And of course I got the Legionnaires because I like the art. It was really cool and they look fantastic, as you can see. Beautiful. So back to his basically his other self is Regulation Liberator Echo Veil. So when he's called from deck, you can Soul Blast 1. It can be any card, it doesn't have to be a Liberator, which is big. And I'll explain later why. You can check the top 5 for Bluish Flame and add it to your hand. Sometimes you whiff, but it's okay. You're trying to plus. And the other effect is that he's an 11k when you have a Bluish Flame Vanguard. So when he attacks, he can attack a rear guard and still get the +2, so he's 11k pokes. It could be relevant depending on the rear guards you're trying to kill. And of course, it's fantastic if, you know, you get a stand trigger, restand him, and give him power. He's a 16k by himself, so that helps too. And to mention, for both of these, they're both the Legion mates for the Legions, where he's the Legion mate for Glare and he's the Legion mate for Percival. So they go hand in hand, and it's synergetic. So with Magnus, before Magnus, I've used units like Bernarius, the one that, you know, gets +2, and then if he hits, he countercharges for every time his skill got stacked. I've played Blaster Blade Liberator with Balon to have like some kind of unflip engine and also access to some kind of retirement. And trying Magnus out after those, I ended up liking Magnus the most, and for the reason is because once you're Legioned, or if you're on the Vanguard, if you're stride a Liberator on top of your grade 3 Liberator that isn't Legion yet, it still counts as 2 Liberator Vanguards, or not Vanguards, but cards in the Vanguard circle. That's what the effect looks for. And he's a free Oath Liberator Echo Veil basically, and he's also, he can grab himself, so you like call, do the skill, grab another one, call, do a skill, and get another one. Different card, could be like Bruno, could be like Josephus, it could be catch call, all that stuff. So he helps with chaining calls more, and also if it's a Bluish Flame that you called, you have the option to bounce it back to your hand, so it adds fodder for glare, and it also adds fodder for striding. So it's pretty good and flexible, and it's costless in a sense that it doesn't require any counterblast or soul blast, so you're able to save those for your later turns. Another thing to note, with Regulation Liberator and then Oath. So let's say you like are going first and you ride up to grade 3, and your opponent previous turn rode up to grade 2, and for whatever reason you're playing Luard, they're on a 10k Vanguard. Because the fact that you ride like a grade 3 Bluish Flame, this becomes 11, and generally you have something behind this, whether it's the Forerunner or something you've called with him. The fact that you can actually just still attack the Vanguard being 11 is nice, and then you got the Twin Drive, and then this is being boosted by something. Let's say Bruno or Josephus, and that's already at least a 16k column. So they're, what they roll a 10k grade 2 vanilla to prevent rush has kind of backfired on them. So you can still rush them early on if you do it at grade 2 and keep it up to grade 3, or you didn't get this guy until you rode to grade 3. And remember, these are non-GB restricted, so it's a huge plus. So let's go to the grade 1s. Let's see. For Josephus, for Bruno, for the PG, and 101. That's a lot of glare. I'll just put it up here. Sure. So that's a lot of Josephus. That's a lot of Bruno. These are cards that you generally want to see when you superior call early on too, and later on. Josephus is your draw engine. Being able to call him from this guy on turn 2 is pretty much equivalent to Benon grabbing Marin or Richard, giving you basically +2 for free on the field, and being able to be aggressive early on. So that's a huge help. And the mention of the Liberator name, that if you end up writing a grade 1 that isn't Liberator, let's say the PG, you can't Soul Blast it, so you have to worry about that kind of condition, but it's not as bad. So being able to ride a grade 2 later on, and then when you're like in your Legion turns, or you're striding, or even your just first grade 3 ride, you're able to Soul Blast at least this guy to get his skill still off, and then you can Soul Blast like the non-Liberators, for example, if you rode them with Regulation Liberator or other cards that don't care with the name. But yeah, I bumped it up to 4 because I wanted to get that draw as soon as possible, and he's pretty handy any time in the game just to get an extra card back in hand if you're just calling on field. And that's one of the things that I noticed about Bluish Flames, is that they don't have any way to generate a hand unless you use like cards like him, or don't call any cards from hand and rely on solely on superior calling from deck, which you normally want to do. But at least in Gurgurwit, you got cards like Jeffrey that are, even if you call them from hand, they still get you a draw. So that's one of the reasons why I actually just played this one off, is so I could have, in the sense, the 5th Josephus. But this is like the closest thing I can get, except for Dindrain. But I wanted to also have like a booster. Sometimes you don't have a booster to conserve hand, and so you can call this and boost like an Oath Liberator Echo Veil to make a 16k column, and that way at the end of the attack you can just swoop it up and get a card back, and it made a nice number, and it got you a card back in hand. And of course this can be called by like your strides, so the strides are generic, so they don't really care that they have to be a Liberator. And so I kind of skipped over Bruno, but let's go back to Bruno. Bruno is essentially there for the glare turn. There is the other option of Horsa, but with the Liberator Bluish Flame grade 2 and grade 3 lineup, they look for Liberators. So you can only call Bruno early on, and if you Legion and all that stuff kind of thing. Sometimes I if it's late game and I use glare skill to like kill something and try to grab something else, I sometimes end up grabbing him, put him in the back row for glare, and then keep calling behind to like start stacking a column and go for the kill turn if possible. Just depends on your scenario. And of course, calling this early on, let's say, if Liberator Echo got you like in grade 2, even though it doesn't do anything because it got just called and you need another superior call to actually get the power, the threat of just being there it keeps people on point. Because you, out of nowhere later on the next turn, you can make a big ass column, and if they don't have a PG or a G guard that can stop it, then they're kind of screwed. And of course, if this is behind glare the whole time when you're like striding and all that, they have to really think about their guarding against your stride turns, because they know like if I use all my G guards and try to save my PGs or something, then he knows that I don't have any G guards and he's gonna do the glare turn and can get big enough to like kill them, you know, especially if glare can get fucking crit. So one of the things that I've noticed with Bluish Flames is the counter charging. This is the reasons I play the unflip PG. Sometimes, or rare enough, there's a counter blast problem. Sometimes you have to like counter blast a lot heavier than your usual plays, and so having the option to unflip helps a lot, because usually one superior call equals one counter blast, and you want to refund yourself so you can keep doing your pressure and using strides like Glorious Raining Dragon later on to refund you, or if you had to go into like the Liberator stride or the Gurgurwit strides and so on. It's also like in the sense like if you couldn't for whatever reason kill him with a glare turn or a Radiant Sword turn, usually at the end of those turns you're out of counterblast, and because of that you can't do anything next turn that's like counterblast reliant. So if they for whatever reason live and you have the PG, you can outflip and at least work with one counterblast for the next turn, and that's enough for a Glorious Raining to go off. You know, all you have to do is call 2 cards and you got Unite and of course Stride, and boom, Glorious Raining. So one counterblast goes a long way. And then one of the Stride Fighter, the reason for the Stride Fighter was being able to consistently stride more often enough, like when you have the first opportunity. It's sometimes hard to actually Legion if the first chance you get, and a good example is that if you know your opponent writes to grade 3 first and then you write to grade 3, you have the opportunity to stride or Legion, but you may not have enough cards in the drop zone to Legion. So this helps with being able to stride on the first turn with using 1 card instead of like pitching 2 if you don't have another grade 3, and in that sense helps. So I added a Stride Fighter for that reason. I played Zoran before, and he's the one that if he's called from deck, you can shove him into soul and then call something else basically. He felt like he was kind of dead if you drew him, and it was already bad enough that I was playing for Josephus, so I rather like depend on cards like to help me stride, or at least like Jeffrey to get me a card back into my hand in that sense. And with cards like Magnus and Catch Call right here, and you got like Oath Liberator and what else, all those cards that can go off on the glare turn to help pump him up higher, and it seemed enough. So that's why I don't play Zoran in this build. So the trigger lineup is still kind of for debate, and that's for the 6 crit and the 6 stand. And I've played 8 crit and 4 stand before, and I'm thinking about maybe going back to that. Jeffrey was something that I wanted to try out because of his utility. Not because it was a stand trigger, but more of his utility. So this helped less strain you from having the need to PG or take too much damage just so you can have counterblast to do stuff. And so even when you get like 1 or 2 counterblasts available, like in the early game, you only have 1 or 2 damage. Seeing this from like a superior call from one of the strides kind of refunds that back and builds up soul. So that's helpful. And I like him so far. And it's kind of helpful in the sense that on the glare turn, people try to focus just to survive that attack, and if they guard to make it like a 2-pass or something, and being able to see a stand to get another attack off, because you generally want to use at least one of your rear guards to poke one of the intercepts, so it's another 5k shield that you can get rid of, so they can't guard, they can't intercept to help survive against the glare turn. And so seeing that stand trigger, standing basically an 11k attacker like Regulation Liberator, could just mean the difference on those turns too. And then of course Catch-All at 4 over the 2 Jerry is because Catch-All can just call another card if like I don't like these choices, but I saw Catch-All, so Catch-All is gonna help me fix that. And also he activates Unite if you like call something and he was it, and he calls something else, that you have Unite. So that it's huge. And sometimes you can also just do it because you want to get Bruno bigger. And then of course with Cheer Up Trumpeter skill on the Vanguard's going to get bigger too, and so on. Catch-All is really good. Definitely try it out. And he's a Liberator, so that helps a lot too. And the crits, 2 vanilla. It could be whatever. I got the shiny promo. As you can see, it's kind of shiny. And I got the other crit trigger that has a skill. And she's handy in the sense that she checks the top 4 to search for a Bluish Flame. If you feel like you could hit a Bluish Flame, more than likely you'll use her skill, other than times that you kind of use it just for guarding purposes. And at the same time, you could always like shove it back into deck, so she's also a target that you can just call if you need to be. Like if you didn't see the other 2 targets were as viable, like especially for like 2 heal triggers or something, you can at least call in the attempt to get something off her skill. And if you do, you get something in your hand. Woohoo, right? And it goes back to deck, so it's a crit that goes back to deck. It gets you your combo pieces for like glare or striding, and helps promote those things. With the heal trigger is Elixia. She's pretty cool. One, she has the Liberator name, and she helps with countercharging as well. So you can Soul Blast one, and if you have 1 card or less in your damage zone that is, you know, face up, then you can countercharge by Soul Blasting. And so she's another unit that can Soul Blast anything too. So you can Soul Blast any of your non-liberated cards from the soul. So you can save those liberated cards for Josephus to keep drawing. And she pairs up with the new G-Guard as well. So that's the main deck. It's a really fun deck, and I like the choices through playtesting, and I'm still open for different options. One of the revelations I got from Bernarius, the Grade 2, was that he's a really good card, and I think he shines in theory, but sometimes the practicality, being able to try to unhit, I'll just do the strides first, may not be viable, especially if you're trying to save your Brunos for the Vanguard instead of like for the rear guards. Remember, the goal of this deck is to have the viability option to have glare anytime online if your opponent just, you know, decides to fuck up, or if they don't have a G-Guard and they're shit out of luck. So I don't know. So that's one of the reasons why I don't play Bernarius, the Grade 2. With the strides, so because we're a Liberator deck, we can play Holy Flame. And what he is basically an Oath Liberator Aggro Veil. All you have to do is just Counterblast 1. It's a once per turn. Check the top 3 and then call anything. Doesn't check for the Liberator name. And that unit gets +2. So if you call like a Magnus, for example, ideal, he'll become an 11k, and then because he's Liberator and your Grade 3s are Liberators, you have 2 Liberator Vanguards. 2 Liberated cards in the Vanguard circle. There you go. He can go off and get more chaining calls. So he's ideal for first stride if you're trying to build up a field and conserve hand and do some pressure. Especially if your opponent's like not so high damage. You can at least like poke and stuff like that, because more than likely they're going to take at least 1 or 2 or 3 attacks no matter what, just to get some more damage, or don't have the proper guarding power during that turn. So the other option to first stride is Loggerget himself, and he just enables another attack, and potentially calling cards like Oath Liberator himself, and because you flip him, he gives all your regards and himself +2. So when he comes out, he becomes an 11k attacker, and so any of your other grade 2s that are besides Regulation Liberator, they become 11ks. And then of course, if you like call him, then you can call other stuff. And if you have a Legion Heart for whatever reason after that, you can use skills him to keep calling units and stuff like that. Of course, he's Unite, so you do need to proc that, whether you call 2 cards from hand or you call Oath Liberator to do the 1 card Unite active kind of thing. So with Glorious Raining, he is really good. You don't go into him often enough. The deck strides not as much as you think. It has the option to Legion, and sometimes that is the better play, and especially if you don't have the stride fodder, whether it's a grade 3 or stride fodder, to stride effectively. So it has options of when not striding, so I rarely use the 4, but it can come up, and so I do recommend playing 4 the Glorious Raining. And he's so nice that once you start being able to call 3 or more, he refunds himself, and you make these like massive fields after like poking kind of thing, and you generate 5 attacks that way as well. And he also soul charges, so that might become relevant later on. You know, feeds for Josephus, feeds for the heal trigger to help unflip people more, that kind of thing. And of course, he helps preserve your hand too. So like if you just want to call like a card or 2 just to do the Unite and poke against like a control deck, so you don't like fall behind or that kind of sense, you're at least playing pressure and then calling stuff, and then if they kill your shit, you can just Legion the next turn and shove all your combo pieces and triggers back that that you lost. You know, they're not gone forever, you know. So that's one of the cool things about this deck, is that you have access to Legion to recycle your stuff and triggers. And so I play Spearcross, and there was a huge debate with this guy and Glorious Raining. So there is a use case for him, and that's when you don't have shit anymore, and you have no field, you have no hand, but you have plenty or kind of less, or even just the 2 or whatever. But point is, you stride this guy, and you call as much as basically you have face up on the G zone. And boy, that can mean the hugest difference. Because we stride and we can't like superior call like a good break stride would, this is actually helpful. So you could just build a field out of nowhere. And because it can do a massive field call, if you call any Brunos, those Brunos will go off and see the 4 other cards, and it's a guarantee plus 12 to that column, which is nice. So that's why I still play a pair of Spirit Cross, because he persona flips, and I still pair it off with the Glorious Raining. They have different purposes, where this, you definitely need something to begin with to do anything. This helps. Where this is like, yeah, I can activate Unite, but I can still go in there in the battle phase and apply more pressure that way. And then the one else is Scorch Point and Radiant Sword. Scorch Point, if you think you're gonna like mass superior call with some of the units you have, whether it's Oath Liberator, or you think you got a Legion Heart that you can call Oath Liberator and get like Magnus and then start calling and chaining and catch goal and all that stuff. So if you know, you can do it at first stride. If you can do it to go for the kill, just to make a big Vanguard attack, and your rear guards are getting +5 calling from the deck, so that helps too. So he's there for the option. And then of course you got Radiant Sword himself. When you have a field, or you can generate a field to trigger his Unite, of course, and you have plenty of resources to really make him such a big field that your opponent like doesn't have as many PGs or doesn't have as many G guards, then it makes more sense to like, I'm gonna beat you with brute force. So even if you have grade 0s like crit triggers or stand triggers or whatever, you're still gonna drop a lot of cards, and he's great for that reason. So you have multiple finishers in this deck. You have Glorious Raining, you have Radiant Sword, you have Law Gurguit, and then sometimes Scorch Point. We don't play the GBA because, like I said, this deck doesn't strat as often as you think. So getting to GB8 is kind of hard, so I don't bother with the GB8. And for the room, left was 4 G guards, and Slay Me is really handy, where you can recycle some of your rear guards back to deck, and then maybe take out some rear guards that you don't want there anymore. And a good example is, I don't know. But point is, you can call something for shield value, or you can just call him out for the next turn. You could just legion them back. So, but point is, he's a 30k shield usually. So kind of reminds me of Nagar Nora from Grand Blue. And then of course there's the Fighters Collection one, Rhea, where if you just have 2 rear guards or more, it's a +5. So that's an easy condition to me. And sometimes you just need 20k shield. You know, that's really it. And so these 2 are special. So you got the Fighters Collection, at least the most recent Fighters Collection, G-Guard, where if you Counter Blast 1, you check the top 2 from your hand, from deck, and you pick 1 to guard with, and then gets the red tech skill where it can be placed on rear guard. I kind of wished it was call, but it says move. Yeah, it says move, not placed. That's what I mean. So cards like Flipper, Agavale, or Magnus won't go off, and that kind of thing, so you can do some shenanigans. But being able to G-Guard and not rely on having rear guards, this helps too. And of course it flips a G-Guard, so it gets you closer to having more cards face up in the G-Zone for Glorious Raining or Spirit Cross. So she still helps in that sense. So it's like, just because we don't have the GB8, her unflipping of a G-Guard is still beneficial to other cards. And then we have a Screw. If you don't have any rear guards, and of course you're probably going to go through one of these against like Kagero matchup, Norakami, or Lean Joker. So being able to guarantee 25k shield helps, especially if you got like grade 3s in your hand, or useless grades 1s in hand. I mean, cards like Josephus are useless in the hand, so you might as well ditch them and then shovel them back into deck if you like Legion and all that stuff. And so that's why I play him, just because if you have no rear guards and you're needing the extra shield, and even if you use her already or don't want to use the counterblast for her skill to save up more counterblast for the next turn, then those are your 2 options, right? So yeah. So like I said, it's having the option to do this nasty explosion blue turn, where essentially you just scoop this up and then either call Bruno or whatever, or it's been there for the late game, and then you move your Forerunner on the side and decide to, like, I'm gonna go ham today. Explosion blue. And like I said, for every call, your column was gonna get +6. And what's relevant with this Forerunner, if it's still alive, or you Legion back and draw it later or call it or something, you can swoop it up into Soul to get the Vanguard of the skill against something that can either head around this or defeat Flare or something, right? Because the important part is that Bruno needs to boost, and so if you can at least do this, it's still helpful in that sense. It might not be as helpful, but it's a thing, right? So having this turn is just like ridiculous. You can kill your opponent at 3 damage. You know, it's just, it puts fear into people's minds. But it's a really fun deck. I highly recommend trying it out. I say it's in the tier 2. I do recommend playing it and experience it yourself. It's a deck that definitely takes some time to like learn, because some things are worth keeping in hand and not calling. Some things are worth the counterblast or not, and the deck can reward you if you play it well. And it can be freaking nutty sometimes. Like, you can even use this attempt to so if you have no Bluish Flame in hand, for example, and you're superior calling, his other skill is still in standby, and for whatever reason you get the grade 3 the Bluish Flame basically into hand during those other skills resolving, then you choose his skill to resolve later after that, and you can still do the skill because it's not part of the cost. I think that's how it's rolled. But, or maybe it's just because it's like, it's not like a state thing, it's more like put in standby, and then if you can resolve the cost later on, then you can still do it. So that's how they ruled it. You know, it's been a couple years now actually since Legion format. So it's cool stuff. And I do have Gurgrit, so be on the lookout for that later on. And yeah, so hope you guys enjoyed it. Like, subscribe, share, and comment for any tips. If you guys think that I should try out some different cards, or think that there's different applications for this deck besides promoting the Glare turn outside the Stride turns. And also with, you know, the future stuff coming out, eventually for golds, and hopefully we get some Bluish Flame support. I've been waiting for more Bluish support myself. So till then, guys, see ya. Bye.